Babysitting is one of those things that seems too safe to go wrong. Nice house, quiet neighborhood, child asleep. That's what she thought when she accepted the job. The contact came through a friend's recommendation, a couple who needed to go out for a few hours at night, nothing unusual. The house was in a typical residential neighborhood, well-lit streets, houses all looking alike, nothing that stood out. When she arrived, the parents were friendly but rushed. They said their daughter had already eaten, bathed, and would probably fall asleep quickly. The girl was 5 years old, too quiet for her age according to the babysitter, polite but observant. As the parents got ready to leave, the babysitter noticed something odd right away. The house was big, but it felt too empty. Not empty as in silent, empty as in space, as if the rooms were too large for what was inside them. Before leaving, the mother gave a few simple instructions. She said not to go into the room at the end of the hallway. It was a messy office.
The babysitter thought nothing of it. Many houses have that off-limits room. The parents left around 8 o'clock. The girl went to bed soon after, without complaint. Everything seemed fine for almost an hour. The first strange thing happened around 9. The babysitter was sitting on the couch, watching TV with the volume low, when she heard a sound upstairs. Footsteps. Slow ones. She immediately thought of the child. She went upstairs and found the girl in bed, awake, staring at the door. She asked if everything was okay. The girl said yes, but then asked something that made the babysitter hesitate. "Did you hear him walking too?" The babysitter smiled, trying to keep things light, and said it was probably just the house making noises. The girl didn't smile back. She just turned to the side and closed her eyes. Back on the couch, the babysitter began hearing other sounds.
Not footsteps, something subtler, as if someone was moving things upstairs. Drawers, light objects. She tried to ignore it. Houses make noises at night, but something didn't fit. The sound always came from the same direction. The end of the hallway. The room the parents had asked her not to enter. Around 10, the phone rang. She answered, thinking it was the parents. It wasn't. On the other end, only silence, very faint breathing. She said hello a few times until the call dropped. Minutes later, the phone rang again. Same silence. She hung up without saying anything. When the phone rang a third time, she answered, annoyed. Before she could say anything, she heard a voice.
Low. Calm. Asking only, "Did you check on her?" The call ended. The babysitter froze, holding the phone, trying to rationalize. Maybe a mistake, a prank call. But something didn't feel right. She went upstairs again to check on the child. The girl was sitting in bed, awake, looking at the door. Before the babysitter could say anything, the girl spoke. "He calls when you go downstairs." A chill ran through the babysitter's body. She asked who he was. The girl shrugged. She only said, "He stays in the room at the end." The babysitter laughed nervously and said no one was there. The girl replied, completely naturally, "He doesn't like it when you say that." From that moment, the house felt different. Not physically, but in atmosphere. The silence felt heavy, the air still. The babysitter decided to call the parents. The phone rang and rang until voicemail. She tried again. No answer. As she went downstairs, she heard something that made her stomach turn. A door closing upstairs. Not a creak, not a slam. The clear sound of a door being shut carefully. She froze, staring at the staircase. The phone rang again. This time, she didn't answer. The ringing stopped, but the sound didn't. She began to hear footsteps, not upstairs, in the hallway. The babysitter ran to the child's room and shut the door. The girl didn't look surprised. She just looked at her and asked, "You heard him come down too, didn't you?" The babysitter sat beside the bed, trying to stay calm. She said the parents were coming back soon. The girl shook her head. She said, "He always gets closer when they're not here." Suddenly, they heard something outside the door. Something brushing against it, not knocking, a light dragging, like fingers sliding across the wood. The babysitter held her breath. The girl covered her ears. The sound stopped for a few seconds. Then, a voice, very close to the door, whispering, "Is she asleep yet?" The babysitter didn't answer. The doorknob turned slowly, stopped, turned again, then released. Footsteps moved away, down the stairs. Moments later, the parents arrived. The babysitter left the house almost running without explaining much. The next day, she called the friend who had recommended the job. She told her everything. The friend was silent for a moment, then said something the babysitter never forgot. She said that wasn't the first babysitter to complain. One had asked to leave in the middle of the night. Another never replied to messages again. When the parents were questioned, they said their daughter had a very active imaginary friend.
The babysitter never babysat again. Years later, she heard the family had moved suddenly. The reason was never mentioned, but according to neighbors, after they left, no one stayed in that house for long. There were always reports of noises at night, phone calls with no one on the other end, and the constant feeling that someone was watching over the house, even when no one was there. The ad seemed far too ordinary to draw attention. Babysitting in a quiet neighborhood. One child, a few hours. The only unusual detail was the pay, much higher than normal. She accepted without thinking twice. The house was on a cul-de-sac, one of those very silent streets with tall trees and dim lighting. When she arrived, the parents were already ready to leave. The father quickly explained the child's routine. He said their son was 7, calm, but didn't like sleeping alone. The mother added something strange. She said that if the boy woke up during the night, the babysitter must not leave the room with him, under any circumstances. She found that odd, but agreed. Before leaving, the father showed her something else. A small monitor on the living room table. It was the house's camera system. One camera in the living room, one in the backyard, and one in the upstairs hallway. He said the monitor stayed on because the boy felt safer that way. The babysitter thought it was overkill, but didn't question it. The parents left around 8. The first part of the night was calm. The boy had dinner, watched a little TV, and went to bed without complaint. She sat by the bed until he fell asleep. Before closing his eyes, he said something strange. He asked if she could also see the man at the door on the camera. She laughed, thinking it was just a child's imagination. She asked which door. He replied, "The hallway one. He's always there when it's dark." She told him no one was there.
The boy just turned to the side and fell asleep. Alone again, the babysitter went back to the living room. The monitor was on. On the hallway camera, everything looked normal. Dim light, rug in place. She sat on the couch and started scrolling on her phone. For a few minutes, she forgot about the monitor, until she noticed something out of her corner of her eye. Movement. She looked directly at the hallway screen. Nothing. Everything normal. Back to her phone. Again, movement. This time she looked faster. She had the clear impression something had changed. The hallway looked darker, as if the light was weaker. She stood and went to the stairs, looking up. The hallway was normal. She went back and sat down again. Soon after, the boy called. She went upstairs. He was awake, sitting on the bed. He said he was closer now. She asked who. The boy pointed at the bedroom door. He said the man sometimes came right up to it, but never entered when someone was awake. She shivered. She said it must be a dream. The boy replied with something that made her heart race. He said he didn't dream when the man appeared, because he only came when everything was awake. She stayed until the boy fell asleep again. Back in the living room, she decided to watch the monitor more carefully. The hallway camera showed something different now. The image looked slightly distorted, as if the focus was off. She leaned closer to the screen. That's when she noticed. There was something in the hallway. Not a full body. Something partially visible. An irregular shadow near the boy's bedroom door. She blinked. The image returned to normal. Nothing there. She took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Then the monitor beeped. Motion detected. In the hallway camera. She looked. The shadow was back. More defined. It didn't look like a full person. It looked like someone leaning, as if watching the bedroom door.
They stopped right outside the door. A voice whispered, "Can she sleep now?" The doorknob moved slightly, stopped. The footsteps retreated, down the stairs. Minutes later, the living room lights came on, the sound of the front door. The parents had returned early. The babysitter left the room in shock. She quickly told them everything. The parents didn't look surprised. The mother only apologized. She said sometimes the cameras confused the boy. When the babysitter mentioned the shadow, the father turned off the monitor and said something strange. He said the hallway camera hadn't worked in months. She never went back. Years later, she found an online account eerily similar. Another babysitter, another house, another boy, and the same detail. A camera pointed at a hallway, showing something that didn't appear anywhere else.